Today is March 22nd, 2024, and it's the launch day of both Dragons Dogma 2 and Rise of the Ronin. And for what should be a pretty wonderful day with regards to getting an incredible game in Dragons Dogma 2, which all the reviews seem to point to it being, we are instead met with more publisher meddling and frankly more bullshit for consumers who should not have to deal with a lot of the nonsense they're putting into this game. Now, performance for the game was already kind of understood to be rough. It's uncapped on consoles. The Xbox platform has a much better time handling that frame rate versus the PlayStation version, which regularly dips into the 20 FPS realm. The PC version is also taxing to quite a bit of systems, even with 40 series cards and 7000 series graphics cards. The game does look visually very impressive, so it's understandable that this is going to tax a lot of systems. But that's not necessarily what most of the issues are with the game today on launch. Seemingly absent from all the reviews and sort of not mentioned at all were the microtransactions that they've added into the game as of launch. As soon as the clock ticked over midnight here, EST, where the game is available on Steam, you can see a myriad of reviews that have become overwhelmingly negative thanks to the inclusion of these microtransactions on top of the rather poor performance. And to make matters worse, we have the inclusion of Denuvo with the PC port. Why publishers like Capcom continue to include Denuvo is beyond me. They say it stops piracy, but we've seen time and time again that games that have Denuvo get cracked anyways, so it doesn't really stop piracy. It seems more so that it makes it slightly more annoying for pirates and people who want to crack the game open and make it available for free than, say, without the software, but it certainly doesn't stop it full sale. And what usually ends up happening is consumers end up paying the price with poor performance, which we've seen Denuvo does affect PC performance in particular time and time again with regards to actually playing the game on your hardware. Some of the reviews are reporting that installing the game on too many devices simply locks you out of playing the game anymore thanks to Denuvo, which is really shitty. Usually what happens with Denuvo is that it eventually is patched out after a couple months from launch, as publishers are mostly including it as a means of trying to protect sales for the first couple months of the game's lifespan, and then removing it later on once they believe it's not sort of going to be as useful to stopping pirates. Still, it's a really inelegant solution, I think, and it really just encourages more people to pirate the game when they know it has Denuvo, because it really only negatively affects paying customers, which is kind of antithetical to the inclusion of it in the first place. Or at least it should be, considering that paying customers shouldn't have to pay the price, but this is sort of the world of PC publishing. Capcom's no stranger to using Denuvo, neither are many other publishers. With regards to the microtransactions, this isn't new. We see stuff like this all the time, from back during Deus Ex Mankind Divided when they were selling Praxis upgrades via their in-game store, to Assassin's Creed Odyssey having XP boosts to sort of help you circumvent that, which have also been included in Valhalla and later entries in the Assassin's Creed franchise. And now with Dragons Dogma 2, we see Wake Stones, which is an upgrade material, but also material used to allow you to revive yourself or your pawns once dead. As well, they're also selling Rift Crystals, which, if they operate in the same way that they did during Dragons Dogma Dark Arisen, this is the currency you need to hire pawns from other players, or in some cases it's used to buy gear or to decrypt gear from endgame vendors. Back during Dragons Dogma Dark Arisen, you would use Rift Crystals to decrypt, tier 1 through 3 Bitter Black Isle gear and armor. When you look at the pricing of some of these microtransactions, they're all under $5. I don't think the issue necessarily is the price, but you have to wonder just how much of the game is being tailored to sort of provoke players into purchasing these kind of microtransactions. We saw that with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. The XP grind was fairly extensive, and you would have to regularly stop playing the main quest and go and do side quests to sort of get yourself back to the appropriate level to even take on the main quest. And now, whether this was done intentionally or not, it resulted in feelings from players of almost needing to purchase XP boosts to sort of stay on level to continue onward with the game without having to spend hours upon hours of grinding experience through side quests. This kind of stuff is really just anti-consumer, creating problems and then trying to sell you the solution. It's really shitty, and I think it otherwise kind of spoils what should be an amazing game. I don't think anybody expected that we were going to get a sequel to Dragons Dogma from how long it's been since the original and the re-release in Dark Arisen, but also just from the fact that this isn't necessarily a marquee franchise for Capcom. The original Dragons Dogma plus the Dark Arisen re-releases have sold collectively around 8 million copies as of last year in total since their original release. But a lot of those sales came much later than the initial launch, which only saw the sales top around 3 million. The original game had become sort of a cult classic, and so over time, it's sort of become this much greater thing than it was at launch. So to see this sequel, I think a lot of us were really excited, especially because this means that maybe if this sells well, we might get a third entry, which is sort of insane to think about when you consider the beginnings of this game and how long it's been since the original. And then now we see shit like this, where they're trying to sell microtransactions in a single-player game that doesn't need it, as some reports are saying that the upgrade materials they're trying to sell you are not even that difficult to sort of grab in the game. But it's still really shitty when you consider that, but we really don't know the extent to which these might be easier to grab throughout the entire game's lifespan, as there is an endgame portion to this game. On top of that, one of the microtransactions are port crystals. Now, before Dragons Dogma Dark Arisen, you had to use port crystals to sort of strategically place teleportation across the game world. And with Dark Arisen, they added the Eternal Fairy Stone, which sort of allowed you to teleport back to New Grancis or Grand Soren regularly for free without having to continually spend resources on teleporting. But we see with this game that they've added the ability to buy port crystals, and we see that they're selling time-saving mechanics. Now, what makes this particularly kind of interesting and a bit weird is that the director of the game, Hidetaka Itsuno, had talked in an interview prior to release about how games that need fast travel just aren't fun. And I don't necessarily know if he believes that himself. And in hindsight, those comments seem a bit tone-deaf when you consider that they're trying to sell you the ability to fast travel in the first place. So it makes you wonder if the intention was to always sell this from the beginning, and that's why it's included in the game in the first place. It just makes the experience feel almost tailored towards additional spending from consumers. Single-player games aren't live service. They don't need to have these kind of microtransactions. And more often than not, I think it hurts the relationship between players and the game publishers and the developers. You're creating a single-player experience that's supposed to be tailored to your progression within the game. And then you're going out on your own and selling solutions to problems you yourself create that you expect players to run into in an attempt to get them to spend more money. There's a level of trust that exists between the developer of a game and an experience and the player and consumer of that experience. That the experience is made with the intention that you play through it, and all the tools will be at your disposal within the game that shouldn't require you to sort of go outside of it. Selling resources and selling catch-up mechanics and selling teleportation crystals or endgame wakestone shards or wakestones or endgame rift crystals, it sullies the integrity of the relationship between the developer, the publisher, and the player. And ultimately, I think the experience is going to be worse for it. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video that, by all accounts, this is an amazing game. It's an amazing sequel to the original, it improves upon it, and is a great reimagining and reboot to what was the original Dragons Dogma. But I know that given the game's literal performance on platforms and consoles, and given the game's sales performance, these sort of extra details in the margins with regards to microtransactions and to Nouveau are going to be problems for people going forward when they look back on this game and wonder how the experience was, and then maybe second guess themselves for future iterations. My hope is that maybe Capcom sees the response to these microtransactions and sees the response to the Nouveau and works on improving the experience for players, but I have little hope that they're going to do this until maybe a month or so after the game is launched, and it's really disappointing to see, since I think these do little in the effect of actually generating revenue and stopping pirates, but more so in making the experience feel a bit more hollow than it otherwise needs to, and ultimately performing worse for actual paying consumers than it should be. Dragons Dogma to me is a very precious property. It's the kind of sequel you don't often see to a long dormant franchise, and my initial reaction to the sequel was that I wanted to go out and support it and to buy the game, and I still have purchased the game because I want to see more of Dragons Dogma. The original was such an amazing experience that the sequel being announced almost felt like a fever dream, that it wasn't actually real. And my hope with Dragons Dogma 2 was that the game would be exposed to a modern audience who might find it just as incredible as I did when I first played Dark Arisen, and that strong sales might lead Capcom to further invest in this franchise and to sort of give us more entries into the franchise or even ancillary titles like they did when they made Dragons Dogma Online. My hope is that this is still going to occur and that the game will still sell well, but it really does feel shitty knowing that Capcom felt it necessary to include all this stuff in the game because I don't think it needed it, and I think it only hurts the reputation of them and this franchise going forward. Consumers shouldn't have to be making compromises with publishers to keep the integrity of a single-player game from expanding into what we expect to see in things like live service titles. I mean, to be frank though, even live service titles shouldn't be selling things like teleportation crystals or endgame materials. Those kinds of things ruin the integrity of the experience. The games are worse off for it. I felt it necessary to make this video because I think it's important we hold publishers accountable for making shitty business decisions that negatively affect the products that we intend to purchase from them or intentionally avoid based on what they've done. I hope Capcom sees all the negative press they're getting and all the negative reviews they're getting on Steam and considers other options to change what they've done, because I think consumers deserve better, and I think this franchise deserves better ultimately. That's going to do it for me, guys. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.